Okay, so in part one, we discussed everything you need to consider before coming to a realization that you do need to submit a PR package. There are a lot of things that you can consider that may help you realize that you shouldn't submit a PR package, that you could actually MIPR the money to in-house sources, that you can use the GCPC. So part one, the intent of that part was really to help you work all that out, go through the processes, and we wanted to provide charts to really help you and prevent you from submitting a purchase request package when really it wasn't necessary and you could have done something much easier. So having gone through all that, let's say that you do indeed need to submit a PR package, which is common. It's very common that you'll have a requirement that a mandatory source will not be able to provide that will be over $3,500, and you will need to work with procurement on that. So let's talk about the steps that you need to take in submitting a PR package. The Part 2 training outline has three main parts. The first two parts being the most important, and Part 2 specifically being the most important. Part 1 talks about our new purchase request process, the basics. Now, depending on where we are and when you're watching this process may not be so new. It's new as of July 2017, but this will be the permanent process in which we will be submitting purchase requests, and we will be awarding contracts from those purchase requests, also known as PRs. Part 2 is very important for you as the customer. It'll talk about the complete PR package, what you need to do to submit your PR package to RM, to resource management. Part 3, finally, we'll finish off by talking about a little bit about working with CLINs, which are contract line item numbers in the contract. As a customer who will be defining your requirement, you will need to know a little bit about working with procurement on creating CLINs. The type of CLINs and the CLIN structure greatly affects the contractor and the way they are paid. So it's good to know that information. Okay, so first we're going to start with the basics. The basics of the new purchase request process. Now, up until about March of 2017, we had different PR purchase request processes. A lot of it depended on the geography. So the DoDEA's Pacific Procurement Branch had a completely different PR process. Europe had a different PR process. Right now, we have a standardized PR process. As of 2017, we have standardized the way that you submit your purchase request package for the requirement that you want, and the way procurement works with you in defining your requirement and getting that contract awarded. So that is what we are talking about in this section. So this is the way our DAI PR process works. And I have put in red the language that really applies for the customer. So remember that the PR purchase request process, the process of actually getting a requirement, defining it, committing the money, and obligating that into a contract with a company, that involves three main parties. Procurement, of course, gets involved as the ones who will create the contract and select the source. There is resource management as the second party. They are the ones who commit the funds. And the third major party is, of course, you, the customer, the subject matter expert on the supplier, the service that you need. So your roles are going to be different than the role in procurement and RM. But as we're going to talk about in these upcoming slides, everyone's role is important. A lot of times the roles overlap, which involves a substantial amount of teamwork, and that everyone needs to rely on one another to a certain extent. In other words, we need to rely on each other's expertise, and we need to utilize our own expertise depending on what we're doing in the process. We'll talk about that later. So step 1, you as the customer are going to submit a complete initial PR package to resource management. And then they're going to take that package and they're going to create a PR in the DAI system. And they're going to include all your attachments in your PR, and that's going to flow into SPS. So look at that step 1. That's the very first step. And this is going to be the majority of our training will cover this, what it means to submit a complete PR package. That is your main responsibility in this whole process. In fact, you as the customer kick off this whole process by submitting your complete PR package. So once you do that, RM will take it. They'll take the package. They'll create a PR in DAI. Step 2, the PR will automatically flow into one inbox in PD2. In PD2, the procurement desktop, or SPS is another name for it, standard procurement system. It is our contract writing system. It used to be where we had Outlook inboxes or PR inboxes, and you would submit the PR. The customer would submit the PR directly to a procurement inbox. We're not doing that anymore. You as the customer submit it to RM, and then RM submits it through DAI, and it goes not into Outlook through email, but it goes directly into our contract writing system via the GEX or the Global Exchange if it meets certain standards. So PRDS, Purchase Request Data Standard, this is really information that RM needs to know and procurement, but just so you know, this is the way PRs will automatically flow. And if it fails, if it's not PRDS compliant, we have ways of getting it into PD2, so don't worry about that too much. Okay, so number 3, the third step, procurement staff will then go into PD2 and they will route the PR to an appropriate branch head. Now remember, we talked about the branch heads, that there's now a branch head for IT contracts, for transportation contracts, for facilities contracts. So depending on what the requirement is, procurement staff will route that to the appropriate branch head. So step 4. So the branch head is then going to look at that PR and ensure that it is complete. Now this is an important step for you to keep in mind. That's why I made it red, because what they're going to do is they're going to see and make sure that that is a complete PR package. In other words, they're going to make sure that all the required attachments are in PD2 before workload assigning it to the contract specialist and before the procurement acquisition lead time, or PALT, begins. So in other words, if you submitted an incomplete PR package, the procurement will not begin until the branch head or the contract specialist gets back to you and says, we need the IGCE, or we need the PWS, or whatever is missing. They're going to work with you. They're going to get back to you. And the procurement will not begin until everything has been received. So, in order to make sure you get what you want efficiently and quickly, submit a complete initial package in step 1, because things will not begin until we have a complete package. So whether it's done at step 1 or step 4 will affect how quickly the procurement is done. Okay, so step 5 then, the contract specialist will then work with you on everything else you need to define your requirement, because a procurement request package, a PR package, involves a lot of things other than this initial PR package, which we'll talk about. But they're going to work with you in defining your requirement and getting all the other documents you need. That's all step 5. And finally, they're going to build a solicitation and award. And then once that award is created, it's going to automatically go back to DAI. So the funds that were committed through DAI will now be obligated through a contract, and then the obligation will be recorded automatically back through DAI, through the global exchange if it's procurement data standard compliant, which again is just the data standards that procurement has to follow. So this whole process is an automatic process. That's what we need to keep in mind. Your role is submitting these attachments that will automatically flow through to SBS. So let's talk about this PR package, the submission of a PR package. This is probably the most important slide in this presentation, this slide 37. This shows you what you need to submit to RM to begin your requirement. Now, the minimum PR package requirements is the box on the left. Those documents numbered 1 through 6, that is the minimum PR package. That's what you need to know. And again, this slide was designed for you to print out if you want. Now notice the documents on the right. These are other documents that you really need to submit in collaboration with the contract specialist and procurement for a complete PR package. However, we're not asking for you to do everything to kick off the process. The contract specialist will work with you on about half of the things that you need to do. But these 4 to 6 documents on the left are absolutely essential to kick off the process. We're going to talk about each one, and there's going to be more detailed trainings on many of these. So the first one is the requisition sheet or the requisition worksheet. We'll talk about that, but it's basically a one-page cover sheet defining your requirement. It's very helpful for RM in submitting the PR, also very helpful for procurement once they get the package to know who to call, who to contact. It's a very critical piece of information that we need. Number 2 is the work statement, if it's a service, or PWS, performance work statement, also called a statement of work, SOW, if you've seen that. If it's a supply, number 2 can also be an item description. We're going to have a separate training on the format and the form of the PWS, but just know that is a requirement for the PR package. The independent government cost estimate, also a separate training is available for that. That is required. There is a separate training as well for market research, but you need to submit your market research either in the form of the market research report template or in the form of other quotes and information that you have received through your own market research. The bottom 2, 5 and 6, they are italicized. And the reason why I put those in italics is because they are mandatory required documents if they apply. The first one is ITRA for requirements with IT components. We'll talk about that. And the final one, the sole source justification, only if you are saying that you can only get what you need through one company do you need to submit this justification. If you are saying in your market research report or in your PR package, we have to go with these guys, this is the only company that can do it, you need to submit this additional document, a sole source justification. You need to show and prove why we are not doing full and open competition. Because remember, the Competition and Contracting Act, we are required to compete every requirement. So but there are circumstances in which sole source procurement is the only way to go, but we really have to justify it. Now notice on the right side, we will turn that justification into a formalized J&A or justification and approval or limited sources justification. So the contract specialist will help you on creating a document. But what we need from you at the minimum PR package stage is a justification. So we don't want you to take an old J&A and make it look really nice and pretty in terms of format, and write and make it look like, you've covered all the bases and the actual document itself have no substance to it. We don't care about the way it looks. We care about the justification. So you can just pull up a Word document and write without even a title, Make it clear what your justification is. That's what we care about. We care about why you think that source is the only source. And then we will make it pretty by putting it into the right format in the J&A. Okay, now notice the red writing there. Again, this is another difference between the two. For the minimum PR package, you will send these documents to Resource Management. And Resource Management, RM, will attach these in DAI. The documents on the right, the contract specialist works with you in completing these. Now, there was a question when we had this training earlier about situations in which you want to start engaging with procurement at the minimum PR package stage. And one of the best examples is if you want to do an RFI, a request for information, which really is something that procurement does. If you want to utilize some of these tools that procurement has in early market research efforts, there is a concern that you having to do these 6 documents alone without procurement's help will take away that type of teamwork. And so the answer to that is that procurement is always available to assist even at the very early market research level. So, even though you have to submit these 6 documents, there is a contact sheet that is in the intranet that you can open up. You can see what branch head you need to contact. So if you're doing a facilities requirement, look at the facilities contract branch head, call them and say, I'm working on this requirement. I haven't submitted my minimum PR package yet, so you don't have the PR, but I need help. I'd like someone to work with me on either doing a request for information or looking out in the market to see how I can purchase this. And that branch head will help you. So it's not that you are completely in the dark when you're submitting these 6 documents, but these 6 documents are needed for you to complete to initiate the process. However, if you need help, procurement is there to help you. Okay, so this slide, this PR interface, this is a chart that basically visualizes the process chart that we had earlier. It visualizes it in a different way just so you can see it a little more clearly. Now, really, this chart is most helpful to RM and procurement, because this really shows the process of how a PR goes all the way through into our PD2 contract writing system and then flows back into DAI for recording. So this really doesn't concern you too much. The only thing that you really need to keep in mind is that your PR package that you submit will be going to the yellow square there. Okay, so you're going to submit your whole package to RM, and they are going to submit that whole package with all the attachments through the GEX into the green square. Now remember, if it doesn't meet certain PRDS compliance measures, it may fail, and there are procedures we have in place in case it does fail, and you may not even know about it. But either way, we'll ensure that the PR gets to us in PD2, and then what will happen is you will be providing a point of contact and with the associated number, email, and that contract specialist will then get in touch with you as soon as that PR is received. If you are in the dark anywhere in those pink arrows, you have no idea if a PR has been received, again, get that contact list, contact the branch head, and give him the PR number. Say, I submitted this PR, I'm wondering where it is. It's for this. Please keep that in mind, and please let me know when you get it. Also, if you have an urgent requirement, you can submit the PR package to RM, but I would recommend you immediately call the contract branch head and say, hey, look out for this. It should be automatically flowing to you. I just submitted the PR package to you. It's urgent. Please let me know when you get it. So you can add a little urgency to it. The branch head will then be on the lookout. They'll be aware that the PR is coming. So please, we're going to talk about slides in the future, but communication is essential. We're going to give you the numbers of communication. We're going to keep the contact lists updated in our intranet. Have those numbers at your disposal so you can really engage with procurement while you're still waiting for to be reached out to. You can reach out to the branch head and let them know that you submitted a PR. Okay. The blue arrows, the back end process, that just shows how the award goes back to DAI. Again, this really doesn't concern you too much, but this is just really to show that this PR process from the purchase request all the way to the award is now an automatic process. It makes things streamlined, more efficient, and faster in so many ways. So it's a good thing. But it also calls for different processes. And so that's why we're asking you, different than the way we did things before, for you to submit your package to RM only, to your favorite budget analyst who prepares the PRs, and then you will be contacted by procurement once the PR automatically flows into PD2. So as a reminder, I talked about the Federal Acquisition Regulation in Part 1. This is the main set of standards for procurement personnel in creating contracts, working with contractors. It also talks about the acquisition team. This is one of my favorite parts in the FAR because it just talks about the basics of working together, of communicating. And in FAR 1.102, it talks about this acquisition team. It says the participants in the acquisition process, which is the contracting process, should work together as a team. They should be empowered to make decisions within their area of responsibility. I want to focus on that sentence, on that clause at the end there, that empowered to make decisions within their area of responsibility. That means that each of us have not only areas of responsibility, but we have expertise. So we're not drawing lines in the sand. We're not saying this is my job, this is your job, but we have certain things that we're good at, that we have knowledge in. And that needs to empower us to act where we have that expertise, where we have that responsibility. Because when a procurement system breaks down, and this happens, it's when one of the team members who is not the expert has to act as the expert because the expert has not defined it or not given that information. And when someone has to provide the information, when they are not the expert in that thing, that's when the contract starts looking bad. The procurement process breaks down. You don't get the requirement that you want. But when we are all empowered to act within our area of expertise, that's when we have a really good system, a teamwork system. So the acquisition team consists of all these members, and look, technical representatives and customers, so you are part of the team. As the business experts, procurement will have that expertise. They must be empowered, and they have the responsibility to act in all business decision and business matters. That means that they will be engaged in the type of advice and decisions regarding talking to contractors, negotiating contracts, terms, and agreements. However, the customer, as the subject matter expert, needs to provide the detailed information on that requirement, the technical aspects of that requirement. When you leave it up to procurement to try to fill in the blanks, you never get a good result. So we said there's no lines in the sand, but this is a swim lane chart, this overview of the acquisition team responsibilities. Now this is cradle to grave. You have these resources on the intranet, so I won't talk about them too much, but just notice the very left part. Now, preparing the PR package for RM, that's you. You are green as the customer. And notice procurement then is the pink lane and RM is the blue lane. Now, all of these are things that we do that are in accordance and in proportion to our expertise and our area of responsibility. Notice that a lot of it overlaps, of course, requires a lot of teamwork. Now notice that you kick off the process by preparing the initial PR package. That's those 4 to 6 documents that we had in that chart. Now notice that there's no overlapping there. So there's no pink square right under that. So procurement really doesn't help you with that. However, procurement will help you if you ask for it. So if you ask for help for that initial package, we're not going to do it for you because we can't. We don't know about the requirement, but we will help you provide that information. Now, note also that when I say that procurement will not do it for you, that's not drawing lines in the sand again, but it's relying on your expertise. Those 4 to 6 documents are part of the initial package for a reason, and the reason really is because you are the only person who really knows that type of information. Procurement, we may be experts at business and in contracting, but we are not experts in your requirement. So we'll have to rely on you to define your requirement up to a certain extent, and then we can help you tailor it more when we receive the PR package. So again, here is the PR package. 1 through 6 are the things that you need to submit to RM if you have a new requirement. Keep those 1 to 6 of those 4 to 6 documents in mind. So with those slides in mind, we talk about what we need for a PR package. We're going to talk about each element in a little more detail. However, those 4 to 6 documents really have to do with accurately describing the need that you have, whether it's a custodial services or a subscription to an online class, or it's a book or a supply for a student, or it's special education services. Whatever it is, you need to be able to accurately describe your need and communicate that to procurement. In the same way, procurement needs to communicate to you what they need. So, in a nutshell, the acquisition process was designed to be completely reliant on this kind of effective communication among all team members. And this is just kind of common sense because everywhere in life, effective communication is what keeps things going and keeps things from breaking down. However, with procurement, it is very real that if there is not effective communication, the procurement process does break down, as it has many times before. And it's even more important, we talked about this at the very beginning of the training, as we are now going through time zones with the new DoDEA structure, where we're talking across time zones. We're talking to people in Pacific people are talking to people in Alexandria, Virginia. It's even more important that we find ways of adapting but maintaining that effective communication. So when you're talking about these 4 to 6 documents, call it the minimum PR package. We're also calling it the bare bones package. Again, as I mentioned before, it's really about these 4 to 6 documents are about how you are describing your agency needs. The FAR, Part 11, is an entire part on effectively describing your needs. And in FAR 11.002, it talks about specifying your requirement, using your market research in order to promote full and open competition, and only use restrictive language as necessary. So, we know that you want to promote full and open competition. Of course, keep in mind that we have small business rules that we need to follow, but we don't want to just select one person. We can't just go to the store and select our favorite brand like we do in our personal life. The government is different. We have to give everyone the opportunity to compete for providing what we want. And secondly, in order to obtain this full and open competition, we need to do away with restrictive language as much as we can, as much as necessary. So if we need library bookshelves, we need to find out what are the minimum characteristics of that bookshelf that will fulfill the mission. We need bookshelves that fit in the area of the library that we want it to fit. They need to be durable. They need to hold books. Right? When we start saying things like they need to be constructed of oak, they need to smell nice, they need to be green, or they need to be durable plastic, when we start using this restrictive languages, we start narrowing down the marketplace. We start taking away that competition. It is very common to do that. We need to stop doing that. We need to be as general as we can, but at the same time, specific as we need to be to get what we want. It can be a challenging balance, but it's something that we need to be skilled in when we define our requirements. So there are 3 things, the way that you can state your requirement. In terms of functions to be performed, performance required, or essential physical characteristics. So instead of saying you want a Wilson volleyball, talk about the physical characteristics of what you need. Probably just volleyball. What makes that brand so special to you that you feel like you just have to have it? And if you really feel strongly about a particular brand that you have to have, explain it not by brand, but by the essential physical characteristics. So, if you think a Wilson volleyball is the only volleyball for you because it bounces the best, or it has the best, has the best buoyancy, the best bounce characteristics, whatever that is, then explain it that way. Say, I need a volleyball that can bounce however many feet, if you really think that's important. But remember, what we are starting to go into is restrictive language. So is that restrictive language necessary? These are the things that you need to think about. So I'm going to emphasize again, promoting full and open competition is what the goal is here. There's been a misunderstanding within DoDEA. I think it's probably a misunderstanding government-wide that when customers submit their market research or their market research report, which we have a training for, there's a misunderstanding that report is for the purpose of narrowing down or chiseling down to a specific contractor. So often reports come in and they say, okay, so I looked at the market, I looked at all these websites, and I did all my market research, and these are the guys that I want. This is the conclusion I made, and these guys are the best guys for the job. That's not the purpose of the market research report, and it's really not the purpose of market research. Procurement will chisel down. They are the ones who will make the selection. They will pick the person who is best. What the market research report is really supposed to do is the opposite. You are supposed to be finding as many sources as you can to fill that job. So you want to say, ideally, I have completed market research, and these are all the contractors that I found that can fulfill what I'm looking for, potentially. And then, of course, the solicitation and competition process will take those contractors, and we will make sure that the best person is selected to provide it. So you want to promote full and open competition. So finally, when we're talking about accurately describing our needs, we want to think about, as we're tailoring these documents of the bare bones PR package, the initial PR package, the more time you spend into accurately filling these documents out, giving a good performance work statement, giving an accurate item description, an accurate and effective IGCE or market research report, what you are doing when you do that, and when you take the time to do that, is you are ensuring that you are defining the requirement in a way that will help procurement obtain the requirement that you want. That's the first benefit, and that's really a benefit to you that you probably want to keep in mind. There are so many times that you will not get exactly what you want because you have maybe not described it the best way or the most accurate way. It will also enable effective competition. There's a lot of past DoDEA contracts that I've seen where the PWS is, you can't even tell what's being asked. You can't even tell what the requirement is for. It's so confusing. It's not clear, and no offerer will understand if they're putting in an offer what the solicitation is. And so the person who ends up winning the award is, of course, the person who's been doing the requirement for the last 20 years, the incumbent contractor, and the only reason why they won the award And they knew what you wanted is through experience because they've been doing it for 20 years. They can't make any sense of the PWS either. They don't even read it because they figure they know what you want. That is not the way we need to go about the business. We want to enable effective competition. We want to try to reach out to new companies who could do things more innovatively, more effectively, who can reach out new ways of getting what we want. The more detail you have in these requirements, it'll ensure the more meaningful evaluation of offers. There's a rule of thumb in procurement that applies to procurement personnel, and it definitely applies to you as well as the customer, and that is that the more time you put up front for your requirement, the less painful and the easier the rest of the process will be. So if you are not accurately describing what you want at the initial stage, you are going to get proposals that you may have to evaluate according to evaluation factors. And it will be really hard for you to pick a meaningful proposal because the evaluation factors were not written properly, because the requirement definition was not accurate and comprehensive enough. If you are clear and accurate at the outset, you will get what you want. But if you are not, things just start to unravel. And it goes all the way into the award and post-award phase, where you are trying to measure performance of a contract that was not written well because the requirement was not defined well. It'll also speed up the acquisition process. If we do things the right way at the outset, there will be less red flags, less barriers and reviews, and it will, of course, also prevent protests. At a recent DPAP, Defense Policy Conference, with the Army, Air Force, Navy, a whole bunch of procurement representatives were there, and everyone was sitting around talking about what the main reason for protests are. And just to take a step back, a protest is a claim a private citizen can make against the government. So typically we have sovereign immunity against such claims. You can't sue the government unless the government waives sovereign immunity. Contract disputes is one of the areas in which the government has waived sovereign immunity, which means that a private citizen can bring a claim against the government, and that is called a protest. And at this DPAP conference, they said that the main reason for protests, or one of the main reasons for protests, is a poorly defined requirement, when you are not really describing what you need very well. So we talked about the PR purchase request process. We talked about the introduction of the minimum PR package, those 4 to 6 documents that you need. We're going to go into those documents in a little more detail now. So again, this slide has shown up a lot in this training. This slide, the purpose of this slide is also for you to print out by going to our procurement intranet site. You can print these out. The documents numbered 1 through 6 are the documents you need to know about. Now, one thing to note is that, as we mentioned, this is your responsibility to provide the attachments to resource management to RM. If RM does not receive all the attachments, so let's say you only submit the requisition sheet and the market research, or you submit everything but the independent government cost estimate. For whatever reason, if your procurement package is not complete, RM, they are not the gatekeepers of your purchase request package. They are going to submit everything anyway, even if you're missing some stuff. The PR package will then come to procurement in PD2 through that chart we just looked at. And that's when the branch head will notice things are missing, and will either the branch head or the contract specialist will get in direct communication with you as the customer on the things that are missing. So RM will not get involved in any of that. Notice also that we're really talking about PR packages for brand new requirements. There are brand new contracts that we create, and there are also orders that we create against existing contracts. So we obligate money for orders from existing contracts. Those are called BPA calls, blanket purchase agreement calls, or more commonly, we order through vehicles contracts called delivery orders or task orders. Delivery orders or task orders from existing contracts. Those are much simpler. So one scenario, a common delivery order would be for curriculum contracts, books and supplies, for STEM supplies in the education department and the logistics division. They are engaged in a lot of orders against existing curriculum contracts or supply contracts. In that case, your PR only needs the requisition sheet and then any pertinent attachments as applicable. So, for example, for library books, a library book contract, you'll have maybe the list of books that you want as an attachment and then the requisition sheet as an attachment. And we have existing library book contracts that we order, that you can order against. So the intranet that I have mentioned before, that is a resource for all our templates and trainings, that is also a repository for our existing ordering vehicles. So just keep that in mind. I have a couple slides coming up that talk about curriculum ordering and ordering against vehicles, but when we're talking about the minimum PR package, it's much simpler for delivery orders and task orders off of existing contracts. And just as a common sense explanation, because those existing contracts were created with the market research, the ITRA, the IGCE, the work statement, all of that was already done when the ordering contract was made. So when you do an order off of that contract, you're ordering off of a contract that has already been researched and procured. So just keep that in mind. Also keep in mind the requisition attachments that can flow through from DAI to PD2. It's pretty much any format, common format that we use in Adobe or Microsoft Office. So PDF, Word doc, and Excel. I can't think of any other format that we would really use for a PR package. So you would want to keep it to one of these three formats. But Excel worksheets do flow through. So for the IGCE, for example, the Independent Government Cost Estimate, your IGCE will flow through into PD2. Okay, so let's look at these specific elements of the initial PR package. And unfortunately, we can't go through all of these documents in detail. So there are separate trainings for the work statement. It's called How to Effectively Define Your Requirement. So see that training for help in submitting your work statement or item description. There is another training for the IGCE, and it is called Creating a Meaningful Independent Government Cost Estimate. That training will help you submit your IGCE. There are separate trainings for market research and the sole source justification. It is called Conducting Effective Market Research. So check out those trainings for help in submitting those. We will talk about the requisition worksheet and the ITRA in this training because neither of those documents merit a complete training session. We can describe those right now. But keep in mind that you'll want to watch those other trainings to make sure that you are properly and effectively submitting a good initial PR package. Okay, so we did mention that we will go ahead and talk about the requisition worksheet. So let's talk about that right now. And this is available on the intranet site. We have a templates section, and on the templates section we have the most recent requisition worksheet that you can download and use, and that you should be downloading and using for every requirement. And remember that the requisition worksheet is always required. Even if you are doing a delivery order or a task order, you still need the requisition worksheet. So the requisition worksheet looks a little like this image here that's on the left, it changes. We are constantly updating. The most updated requisition worksheet will be on the intranet. So if we do update it based on experience and things that we realize we need to add, we will always have the most updated requisition worksheet on the intranet site. But this is such an important document. You just need to make sure you always have the requisition worksheet included. And one of the main reasons why it's important is because it helps RM submit a complete and accurate PR and DAI. Notice the little words under the title, Requisition Worksheet. It says for input into DAI. So one purpose is so that RM can submit a PR that is accurate, because remember, PRs can fail, and they can fail for not having the right information. So this helps RM. But another big reason why we want you to submit this is so that procurement has the necessary information they need. This is basically like a cover sheet. It's a summary. It has all of the pertinent information that enables the contract specialist or resource management to know exactly what you are asking for. And not only what you are asking for, but equally important, who is the person asking for it. So this is the top half of the requisition worksheet. And again, this could change, but this is what we have. The general format and structure of the requisition worksheet will always be the same. And I put a red square around probably the most important two blocks for procurement. That is the requester point of contact and the phone. We may add email in the future if we haven't already done so. But these two blocks will ensure that effective communication is maintained. If you do not submit this, there will be a communication breakdown. We will not know who to talk to. So the requester POC, or the requester point of contact, this is the person that will be able to answer the questions about the requirement. They will be the subject matter expert. They will be the guru on everything about that requirement. We don't want it to be a supervisor if the supervisor does not know about the requirement. So this has been a common problem that we've had. It doesn't matter what grade or rank the POC is. From a GS1 to a GS15, we don't care. We want the person in that block to be the person with the answers. We want that person to be the person we can call who will give us the information. So it'll most likely be the person who prepared the initial PR package, but please make sure that information is there. Notice also block 10. This is the part 1 training we talked about, right? This requirement is available in DoD inventory or through another required government source. Well, of course, you're going to put no, because it's not. You're going to say it's not available, because if it was, you wouldn't even be filling out this requisition worksheet. The whole purpose of this block, though, is just to get you thinking or to remind you that you are needing to look through DoD inventory or check. You need to check your house, in other words, before you fill this sheet out, per part 1 of this training. So one of the blocks was picking the right PSC code, the product service code. It was block 6 earlier on. The product service code describes the products and services purchased by the federal government. It indicates the what that was bought. And it's for reporting in what is called Federal Procurement Data Standard, or FPDS. Basically, that is a system in which we report to Congress what we are ordering. It's an extremely important code for procurement. It lets us know what we're ordering. It lets us categorize and create task sheets and report sheets that we have to report to Congress for various types of reports that we have to do annually or quarterly. And just know that the more accurate, of course, the PSC code is, the more accurate our reports are that we are reporting to Congress and the DoD management. So just as a rule of thumb, keep in mind that when you submit a PSC, product service code, Supplies are always numbers, and services are always letters. If you are not familiar with a product service code, by the way, this is something that is procurement's responsibility. However, because RM now has to submit a PSC code, they're required to, and if they submit an improper PSC code, the PR will fail and delay the process. We are now having to submit this PSC code early on in the process, but it's very easy, and I'll show you how to find it. Just keep in mind, though, that if you have supplies, you don't want it to begin with a letter. If you have services as your requirement, you don't want it to be all numbers, okay? So ways of finding out the right PSC code for that block in the requisition worksheet. You can look at PSCs for past PRs. If you've done this for a while now, you'll probably know the right PSC. You can ask a contract specialist. That's always a surefire way to probably get the most accurate information. Or you can look at the psctool.us, which we will talk about in the next couple slides. Keep that link in mind in this slide. You'll have the resource. You can also pause this video and jot it down. It is a good source for finding the right PSC. So this is the PSC tool. You can go to it. You can search under the search taxonomy at the very top. You can look under product or service, and they have different categories that are easy to navigate. So let's say we're looking for custodial services. Okay, so you start by selecting the category that applies. In this situation, we're going to select facility-related services. Under that category, there's several portfolios. So we're going to select housekeeping and social services. And then we can see custodial janitorials right there. The PSC code is then S201. Now notice it's a service, so it has a letter at the beginning. Same process for supplies. You know, if we want to do office furniture, for example, we first go to the furnishings in office, and then we select office furniture there, 7110. Notice, because it's a supply, it's all numbers. So as I stated before, the requisition worksheet provides RM with the necessary information that they need to complete the PR. And this is just a little screenshot. This is a DAI screenshot, but it's just to let you know the type of information that RM is required to provide. And resource management, you know, they won't know the period of performance start date and then end date. They're not going to know a lot of this information. So that's what the requisition worksheet provides for them. You provide it through the requisition worksheet, and then they are able to put the accurate information in through DAI. So the bottom half of the sheet here, again, this may change and be updated, but the general format will stay the same. Keep in mind that you can put in item numbers and CLIN numbers. If it's a brand new requirement, you can do a suggested breakdown of the way you think the requirement should be broken down with CLINs. If it is a delivery order or task order, you need to be very accurate in describing what CLIN number you're ordering from. I'm going to repeat that. If you have a PR for a delivery order or task order off of an existing contract, under the item or CLIN number, you need to specifically state the CLIN that you are ordering off of. So related to what we just talked about with ordering from delivery orders or task orders from existing contracts, I'm going to spend a couple slides just talking about that because it is very common in DoDEA to order from curriculum contracts. So the step-by-step process with that is that the first thing you need to do, if you're ordering from contracts, from curriculum contracts, you need to replenish consumables or replacement of lost or damaged items, whether we're talking about STEM supplies or library books or textbooks. First thing you need to do is go into the procurement intranet website and find that contract that you want to order from. It's going to be listed by topic. You can easily find it by navigating through the intranet, and then open up the contract once you find one that would apply, and find the CLIN numbers that you're going to order from. And then the second box there, you see that you are going to prepare your PR with the requisition sheet, and under the requisition sheet, you are going to reference the exact contract line item numbers and prices on the contract. And that's the information that will flow through DAI into PD2, and procurement will know exactly what you're trying to order and what contract you're trying to order from. So this is what a contract schedule looks like if you're trying to get that information. Again, we're continuing this process of you creating a task order for curriculum contracts. You can see the item number there, 0001AA, and then you have your quantity, your unit prices. You can have all the information there that you need to get the prices that you need to request RM for, and the quantity that is there for you to order from. Just keep in mind, you need to keep the ordering period in mind. Do not select a CLIN with an outdated ordering period or with an order period that has not happened yet. So if you are in 2017, you do not need to be using CLIN 0004AD because the ordering period begins in the 1st of June 2020. Just keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that options have different CLIN numbers. An option is a CLIN that the government has the option of exercising unilaterally against the contractor. Usually options are in years. So an option, the first option year the CLINs will begin with 1. Option year 2, the CLINs will begin with 2, and so on. So this 2004 is for an option year or option period 2. It's typically how we write our contracts in DoDEA. So, as I mentioned before, the other document that we will talk about in this training is the Information Technology Requirements Analysis, or the ITRA. The ITRA is a document that authorizes the purchase of all software, hardware, and non-maintenance services to requirements that utilize information technology. So, this ITRA is required for all requirements with DoD components, regardless of cost. The exception to this is requirements that actually come from the IT division. Now, the reason why an ITRA is not required for IT requirements is because IT has already vetted these requirements and approved these requirements. So an ITRA would be redundant. The whole purpose of an ITRA is to acknowledge, certify, and approve, and confirm that IT division has looked at the requirement and has made sure that that requirement is compatible with the existing IT enterprise. So the reason why we make it required in the initial package is that it wastes time, and this has happened before. If you submit your package, and let's say it's the education division, they have an education requirement with a DoD component, let's say a website, to keep student information. They go through the whole process of creating a performance work statement and creating an IGCE, and we're almost about to create a solicitation. And at the last minute, IT division, who hasn't really known about this requirement, now knows about it, and they look at it and they say, well, we can't do this. This won't fit in our enterprise. This violates a number of PII policies. This violates cloud computing policies, and they don't approve it. We have just wasted all that time. So we want to make sure that IT is on board with our requirements that have any IT component at the very beginning so that we can continue knowing that this will fit into our enterprise. So some of the major things the ITRA will do is it'll ensure that your requirement is compatible with DoDEA's existing enterprise structure, is consistent with personally identifiable information, or PII policies. It complies with all of the constantly growing and expanding cloud computing guidelines, that it's not otherwise available on an existing DoDEA IT contract. They'll double check that. And that it meets all other requirements, such as Section 508, which deals with the accessibility, equal access for all users, things like that. The most updated ITRA form will be available on the procurement intranet. You can also talk to your local IT for the most updated form. There is currently a revision in process. Depending on where you are watching this video, it may or may not be available, but this will be another form that will probably be constantly revised. So just make sure you go to a place that always provides the most updated form. Okay, so we talked about the submission of the PR package. The different elements, of course, may be spelled out more in other trainings, so please see those other trainings for especially the work statement, the IGCE, and market research. So we talked about the new PR process. We talked about the procurement package and how to submit an accurate procurement package. I'm going to spend the next couple minutes just talking about cleanse and cleanse structure. So one of the things to keep in mind when we talk about these new contracts is that if you have a cleanse structure in mind, and by the way, the CLIN, as I mentioned before, is the contract line item number. Requirements are broken down by CLINs, depending on the nature of the item. So let's say, for example, that we have a groundskeeping requirement. We may need to separate cleaning of the track and field with cleaning of around the school grounds, maybe have a different CLIN for snow removal. All of those may have different prices. They may have different components which warrant it to have separate CLINs. So you can break all that down, but just know that the PR itself, if it's a new contract, will only have one line item per line of accounting. And that's just to make things easier for RM. But what procurement will then do is they'll take that PR with just one line item. And the one line item in our groundskeeping example will probably just say groundskeeping. And then procurement can break up that groundskeeping with you as the customer for a better CLIN structure breakdown. And we can break it down by just using that one line item, and that's fine. However, keep in mind that for orders off of existing contracts, your CLINs that you want to order from need to mirror the contract, because you're ordering like you order from a catalog, or like we used to order from catalogs, I guess, in the past. You're ordering from a specific number, so you want to reference that number, and that's a separate item. So ordering off of existing contracts is a little different process. So keep in mind that everything requires communication and teamwork, and line item structures, no exception. Effective PRs is that there needs to be teamwork between procurement, customer, and resource management. So we're not going to talk in detail about the right kind of CLIN structure, but just keep in mind this one thing. And this is actually from the DFARS, PGI 204.7103D, and it says that in structuring your line items, especially in fixed price contracts, which is all we do in DoDEA, due consideration shall be given to the effect of the chosen units of measure on two things: administration and payment. And so a lot of times we break up the CLIN structure because it makes the most sense to us, but we really don't think about how that's going to affect the administration of the contract or the payment to the contractor. And what that ends up doing is it ends up creating problems for us later down the road when we do our cradle-to-grave contracting and we're in the post-award administration process. So to give you an example of what I just said, for supplies, for example, the line item quantities need to match the actual account of the supplies to be provided. So a common thing that the DoDEA may have done in the past is just have a line item that says school supplies, see list, or see attachment 1. And so attachment 1 then breaks down all of the supplies in an attachment, but it's not spelled out in separate CLINs. Well, what that does is if the contractor submits only half of the supplies, we can't pay him for half and not pay him for the other half. There's difficulties that in administration and payment when we don't specify the items in the CLINs instead of just dumping it all on one CLIN and then explaining it in a separate attachment. That creates problems. So keep that in mind. Also for services, we want to think about payment to the contractor. So we want to think about the frequency in which they're going to be paid and which performance will be reviewed. So if there's a 7-month task, if there's a task that takes 7 months for the contractor to do, I've seen contracts in DoDEA where we just make it a quantity of 1 and we call it a job, 1 job. Well, what that does is it makes it to where the contractor will not be paid until they have done that 1 job in full. That's financially burdensome to a lot of contractors, especially when we are awarding to a small business without the financial resources that large businesses have. If we had broken that down by months, the contractor would have been paid along the way per month. It would have been much easier for the contractor to finance the performance. So keep that in mind. A lot of times offerors will see that you're only doing 1 job and they'll make the contract price much higher. So they'll say, okay, well, if I'm going to get paid this way, then I'm going to want to make it worth it for me, this burden that I'm going to go through, and they'll make the contract offer higher. So a lot of times it will actually increase the price of the contract, and we will save money by making our CLIN structure smarter and better. Keep in mind also that this is something that procurement needs to really be mindful of and work on. So this isn't just your responsibility as the customer, but it's something that you work on as a team with procurement. Okay, finally, this is not really related to CLIN structure, but I wanted to, for someone brand new in the contract procurement process, I wanted to provide you with some slides to help you understand the way we number our contracts. You can look at the references up there, FAR 4.16, and then DFARS 204.70 provide the guidance for the way we number our contracts. But this is just so you know, and you can tell a lot by the way a contract is numbered. So if you get to become more and more familiar with DoDEA contract numbers, you'll be able to know a lot about that contract just by looking at the number. So we'll talk about that. So the first part is the DODAC, and it's going to always be HE1254. There was a time when we had different DODACs according to geography. So Americas was HEVAS 6, Pacific was HE1260, and Europe was HE1280. We don't do that anymore. Again, we have restructured our organization. We are centralized to one DODAC, and that is HE1254. So that just means DoDEA. That's our DODAC. Okay, the next two are the fiscal year. In this situation, it's back in FY15. This is a contract that was created in FY15. Okay, we'll talk about the type of instrument in a minute. That's the 9th character, and that's probably the most important if you're trying to find out what the contract is for, or what type of contract it is. And then finally, there's the assigned number. That's just a sequential number that's automatically assigned. So let's look at the type of contract. You'll hear language from procurement folks probably when they talk about, we're going to make this a D contract, or we're going to make this an F contract, or a C contract. What they're talking about is the type of instrument that's going to be designated in the contract number. So a D contract will be a delivery order task order contract. It won't be the delivery order or task order itself. That'll be a different letter, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it will be the ordering vehicle in which you issue task orders from. So there's different types of ordering contracts. There's requirements, and IDIQs are the most common. So an IDIQ contract is a D contract. An F contract is an order placed against our own contracts. So it's an order placed against a D contract or against government-wide acquisition contracts such as GSA, NASA SOUP, things like that. Okay, it says in the future, task orders and delivery orders against our own contracts. It's not in the future anymore. That's happening now. So if we wanted to issue a delivery order against this contract that we're looking at, this 15D003, the delivery order that we use to order from this contract will be an F contract. So F contracts are basically orders. Okay, A C contract is a large contract that's not an ordering or contract or an order contract. Basically, a lot of times you'll have you'll have a base year with option years. That'll be a C contract usually, if there's no ordering terms. It's over the simplified acquisition threshold usually, or the SAT. A P contract, they call it a purchase order. It is a simplified acquisition procedure order. It's under SAT. It's under the $150,000. It's a purchase order. There are different legal implications to a purchase order, but it is a P contract. It's usually small orders. And then A are BPAs. A contract modification will have the contract number. In this case, we're talking about modifying 15C 0003. So again, the fiscal year it was awarded was in FY15. It is a C contract, which means it is a large contract over SAT. The modification then follows with a space and then the letter P and then 00001. Some procurement personnel refer to them as POOs, if you've heard that, or mods. So if they say POO 1 or POO 2, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about a mod to the contract. A delivery order task order used to look like what follows at the bottom there. It used to be the contract number and then have a dash and 0001. It doesn't look like that anymore. So you see now a delivery order and a task order will be an F contract because it will be an order. And then a mod to that delivery order, task order, will look just like a mod to any other type of contract. That concludes this training. This was the first in a series of trainings that we are providing to the customer on how to effectively submit a PR package and get what you want. Again, this was the initial training. So this part 1 talked about, do you even need to submit a package? We talked about the roadmap. Please use those charts and references to help you go through those mandatory sources. And then part 2, we talked about how to submit the purchase request initial bare bones package and what the components of those packages are as well. We encourage you to continue on and watch the trainings for effectively defining your requirement. That's going to talk about how to write a PWS and an item description, how to conduct market research, and the IGCE. That will be the gist of our series for customer training. This is, again, the purpose of this is to get you getting what you need in terms of the requirement that you want, and getting you to be able to research effectively and know more about your requirement and what's out there. Again, please use the DoDEA intranet and use the point of contact list that procurement is providing, which you can also get from the intranet. We want you to know at all times that even no matter what restructuring we are doing or where we are in the world, that procurement is always there on the other side. We are there for you to help you with your requirement. Please reach out and contact us if you have any questions. Thank you.